Vegan.
1, 2,
Free. Welcome to this month's show with me, Berty Justice. Today I am joined by a volunteer and a son of a farmer. His name is Mark Sanders Barwick, and he's also, the volunteering that he did is with Shepperd. How's it going, Mark?
I'm good. How's you, Berty?
Yeah, not too bad. Could be worse, could be better. I'm really looking forward today because we've got lots of really interesting things to talk about. Could you start us off with a track to start the show off today?
Yeah, my first track was She Sells Sanctuary by the Colts. Been a long favourite of mine, and I think it's from the first time I heard it. It was one of those tracks that just blew me away. It sounds a little bit dated now, but it's still got that sort of little bit of a tug every time I hear it. It's just got that kick to it and that feel good factor. So yeah, that's one of my favourites and my first choice.
Me and Mark have known each other for, what is it, like 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we've talked a little bit about how Mark got involved with veganism, but I'd like to ask you a few questions. And the first one I was wondering is, how was it like growing up with your dad, who was a farmer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was seemed fairly natural at the time, but we were a livestock farm and arable, so there were cattle on the farm. There was no dairy at all. It was just arable livestock, and I used to go out during the winter and with my dad on the back of the tractor and would feed the cattle throughout the winter, and the cattle were obviously fairly young when they came to us, and they're quite inquisitive and very intelligent, and so we kind of built these relationships with the animals, very much in tune with them, and saw their individual characters and traits. And there were 2 of mine which were particular favourites, which were I named them Blackie and Curly, but yeah, got a real bond with them, and through the winter months, obviously feeding them, developed a real relationship with them, and that was quite a close bond I managed to form with them.
And so your dad himself, did he grow up on a farm? So he's been doing farming his whole life as well?
He wasn't a farmer, he was a farm labourer, so we sort of, worked on the farm, had a house that came with the farm, obviously, and it was very much part of the life that I grew up with. It was it was on the farm, which was great in some respects, but there was a lot of freedom there, in touch with nature a lot, but also with the I guess the brutal side of nature and that the reality of farming. So yeah, that was a real eye-opener at such an early age. Probably up until about the age of about 7 or 8, I didn't really question it, but then things started ticking over in my head. But it was a bit of an eye-opener.
With the cows, can you remember the age when they left? So they came to you quite young. Yeah. And were they for meat, I'm assuming?
They were, yeah, it was for beef farming. And so when they left after us, they would have been probably about 18 months to 2 years. So they were quite round about what we would have called a yearling when they first came in. So still really inquisitive. And as I say, that I used to go out and feed them throughout the winter. When it came around to springtime, I would cycle to school in the village. And I would sort of go past them in the morning, obviously stop and feed them, sort of give them a bit of grass, say hello to them, pet them, come back home from school and do the same thing there. And then suddenly just one day they weren't there. And they'd obviously gone off to the slaughterhouse. And there's something which I sort of said to my dad. I said, well, where's Curly? Where's Blackie? And he was quite blunt about it and just sort of said, well, they've gone for slaughter. And I said, well, what's that? What does that mean? And he just tried to explain as best as he could, and it never really connected with me. So this went on for a couple of weeks, me asking my father about it, until one day we were sat down at Sunday lunch, and he was quite brutal in the way he sort of put it to me. I sort of said, Dad, so, what has happened to Curly and Blackie? What happens at the slaughterhouse? And he basically just said, they're on your plate, son. And that was, that's
heavy.
Very heavy. And that, for me, there was a switch that went on then that the connection was made, and it's just, whoa, I don't like this. This isn't right.
So would you say that your vegan journey started there at the age of sort of 7 or 8?
There was a definite switch in my head that said, I'm not comfortable with this and I'm not happy. And looking back at it now and speaking to my mother about it, my mother sort of said that when I was much younger, as a baby, she had a difficulty in getting me to eat meat. So there probably was that tendency to not feel comfortable with it and to avoid it. But yeah, at the age of 7 and having that realization that my friends in the field, that those animals which I've been feeding throughout the winter, that it didn't sit with me at all. That just wasn't right in my mind. The ethics just didn't fit with me.
I'm really fascinated because that's really young to be so awake and so aware of the truth and the harsh realities being presented to you.
Yeah.
And it's so my view is that I see when people go vegan is that they're growing up. Do you know what I mean? Like, so immaturity is to just go, I'm just going to kill any animal because I can.
Yeah.
It takes a mature person, in my perspective, to go, actually, no, it's not right to inflict violence and being involved in killing and stuff like that. It's just not good.
Yeah. And I think sort of made the conscious. Obviously, at that age, there was nothing I could do about it. But it was growing up and through my teens, it started bothering me more and more and more until I was 14, 15. Trying to become vegetarian. Then my mother wouldn't let me. And then it got to 16, and I just said, no, that's it. I'm not eating any more meat. In fact, I think it was Boxing Day.
It's a good time of year because everyone else is like gorging and divulging in lots, and you've taken an opportunity to make a stand.
Yeah.
So you haven't eaten meat since you were 16 then?
Since 16, yeah, I was vegetarian up until the age of until about 12, 13 years ago, and then sort of turned vegan from there. I did try veganism at 19, didn't quite fit with me then. It not through lack of trying, but it was just very difficult. There's not the range and the availability that there was that there is now. And growing up in sort of a small town that very much a market town, there wasn't really the availability of produce that there was fresh fruit and veg, but there seemed to be a little bit more of a stigma around it that there is now, is that you had to have some form of protein, that there isn't like the awareness that there is around veganism now, that you can get all the protein that you need from veg. It just that it's like, well, if you don't eat meat, then you've got to have protein from somewhere, and if you're going to give up dairy as well, then where you're going to get your calcium from. So there wasn't that kind of
understanding
and this was pre-internet days, so to be able to get the information from the right sources was quite difficult. It's not freely as available as it is nowadays, I guess.
So you've seen kind of like a big shift in the sort of the availability and supermarkets and restaurants and the kind of like just the growth in general is kind of like exponential, isn't it?
It is, yeah, most definitely. And I think sort of when I made the transition to veganism 12, 13 years ago, I was living in London at the time, so it was a lot. There was a lot more availability of product, and also restaurants as well. And I certainly noticed the difference that travelling out of London, there didn't seem to be that range of products and the easily available products, and walk into a restaurant or a bar and or a cafe and try and get something vegan, then that was impossible. And now even down here in Devon now that it's much more easier. The supermarkets are full up with it, with the right products, and I noticed even just like Veganuary the last couple of years, supermarkets are now jumping on the bandwagon, and they're realizing that hey, we've got to stock this stuff now. That there's been a big sea change.
Could you share with me some of your go-to vegan meals?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I love cooking and certainly doing anything fresh. I love preparing things from scratch. One of my favorites would be just a very simple cauliflower korma. So yeah, just cashew nuts and coconut milk, a little bit of lemon juice, and my lucky 13 spice, which is a closely guarded secret to me. So I like to grind and prepare my own spices as well and mix and blend them. So yeah, it's my lucky 13 is my favorite.
And any desserts you would always go to as well?
Oh, I've got a great weakness for chocolate. So yeah, something gooey, chocolatey, and yeah.
Like brownies or chocolate ice cream?
Brownies, definitely. Yeah, and I just love the new ranges, the availability of vegan ice creams now, and they're becoming better and better and better. That's one thing which since turning vegan, I used to really, really miss. And I traveled a lot in Italy as well, and my wife and I sort of looked to relocate there a couple of years ago. And one thing I noticed even 10, 12 years ago, that there was a greater range of dairy-free ice creams out there, which are much more readily available.
12 years ago?
Yeah, this was in Italy, and it's a big thing in Italy that apparently there's a lot of dairy intolerance there, and I think that's probably because that there is such a dairy-rich diet there that it's starting to become a big thing with intolerance to dairy out there now. So yeah, there's been soy or ice cream out there for a few years now. So I used to love going on holiday in Italy.
That's good to know. It's like that's the great thing about this show is I get all the tips from everyone and all the knowledge. I mentioned at the beginning that you and we've chatted about it before briefly about you volunteering with Sea Shepherd. Could you let me know why you wanted to volunteer with them? What inspired you?
I didn't really know of them as an organisation until I was I was volunteering with the Shark Trust, who are based down in Plymouth. They're campaigning against shark finning and campaigning for shark protection. And I've been volunteering with them for a couple of years. I had done some sort of activism prior to that some time ago, but I've been a little bit dormant on that front for a few years. So yeah, while I was volunteering with the Shark Trust, I became aware of a film called Shark Water by Rob Stewart. And I contacted Rob. This is back in the very early days of Facebook. Found him on Facebook and just sent him a message and say, "Hi, I'm Mark. I volunteer for the Shark Trust." Said a little bit about what we're doing. I said, "We really want to get the film in the UK. Can we work with you?" So, yep, he agreed to it and started working together. He sent me like a promo copy, and I view it, and that just blew me away. There's the context there with all the content was filmed aboard a lot of Sea Shepherd vessels, and that opened my eyes to Sea Shepherd. So myself and a colleague who was a trustee at the Shark Trust at the time, we were sort of like, "Whoa, who is this organisation? We've got to get in contact with them. You know, we're fed up with this just protesting and just saying, 'Oh, stop doing that.' That we like this direct action that they're doing." So that's how we became aware of them, and that's how we became involved. That just got we discovered that there was a guy in the UK who was running the UK chapter. We approached him and became involved from there. Funny enough, the guy who was the trustee of the Shark Trust, who was a good friend of mine, ended up becoming Sea Shepherd's international CEO at the time. So we got quite heavily involved with it.
Sounds good. How long were you with them?
Good grief. Would have been about 8-10 years.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So I've learned a bit about Sea Shepherd over the years, and I was wondering what it was like working with two sort of key figures, Peter Hammerstead and also Paul Watson.
Yeah, Peter. I didn't work too much with Peter. The vessels I was on board was with Paul, so I was under Paul's command. But yeah, obviously working with Peter in conjunction with sort of doing actions together with him. That Peter's just an awesome guy. He's just so level-headed and cool. And yeah, some of the actions which he's been involved in, particularly with the Faroe Islands. When he went undercover in the Faroes on his own.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Very, very brave thing to do. That, I mean, basically he, he's long-haired now and was then, and dark. Obviously he'd been doing a few actions there. So he would have been known uniquely by his side from there. But yeah, he completely shaved his hair off, dyed it blonde, and then went on to the island under his own on his own steam, and was on the island for about 3-4 months, doing a little bit of reconnaissance. But yeah, he's quite a character and very, very brave.
Definitely.
The Faroes are incredibly beautiful islands. They're pushing really hard for tourism. One thing that people don't realise that actually happens on the Faroe Islands is that once a year, they have what they call the Grinderap. So that's basically slaughtering whales within the bays of the fjords and the small islands there, so that they will send out clanger boats, and when they know that there's a pod of whales which are coming, usually pilot whales, it's seen as a bit of an event, as a bit of a festival, and seen as a sport, where essentially that they will go out and send out boats. They usually have spotter planes up as well, looking for the pods. They will then send out boats and put metal poles within the water and bang on the metal poles, creating just a massive wall of sound and driving the whales basically into the beaches, beaching them so they can't get out, and then the whole towns, villages, for their entertainment and sport, they'll basically come down with axes, saws, bludgeoning devices, whatever they can get their hands on, and just jump into the water and bludgeon whole families of whales to death. And they bring their children along to watch for entertainment as well. And in fact, it's seen as a bit of a privilege, so that if they find a pregnant calf, for example, to cut the baby out of the mother, and then give that to one of the children, one of the youngest children, sort of on the shores, and that's their idea of entertainment.
Sounds absolutely mental, and barbaric and insane and violent and weird. From my perspective, yeah.
And they say that they have an indigenous right as it's a cultural thing for them, and that as an indigenous right to them to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, hopefully the work of Sea Shepherd and the people in the world will change that to realise that culture isn't an excuse for bludgeoning innocent beings, really.
Definitely.
So the Sea Shepherd is involved. It's all over the world, isn't it? Really.
Not so much now that because of the Japanese whaling, the arrest of Paul Watson, is that we've kind of been shackled a little bit on that front. So we're focusing campaigns elsewhere, but again, all marine related, and areas where they're needed.
I went to a talk by Peter Hammerstead, and he was talking about floating slaughterhouses. And one of the things that kind of jumped out at me is that is one of the most by stopping a floating slaughterhouse is the same as on land closing down a slaughterhouse. That sort of amazing impact.
Yep.
Could you tell me about any stories that might overlap with that, or some interesting stories along those lines?
Yeah, certainly. So the one of the campaigns which I was involved in was within the Mediterranean against the illegal tuna fishing. So that during the tuna fishing season, there is a quota that vessels are allowed to catch, and that is supposedly closely regulated and closely guarded, but we had information that that isn't always the case. So, yep, one of the campaigns that I was on was actually tracing those illegal operations and the pirate farming operations, and going in and shutting them down.
That's epic. Yeah. So you were basically like the analogy of on land, you were closing down a water-bound slaughterhouse.
Yeah, and I mean particularly with the tuna that they have these massive pens, probably about 30 meters diameter and just as deep, and they just cart these things around the ocean, towing them 3 or 4 of these pens one behind the other, and there's probably value-wise probably about $3 to $4 million worth of fish in each pen.
Wow.
So yeah, we busted a few of those open and
freed the animals.
Freed the animals. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. And have you got another track that you'd like to play?
I have, yes. I've chose my next choice is Bro Him by Pennywise. My reason for that is that during my time with Sea Shepherd, I got to know Zolly Teglas really, really well. Fantastic guy, awesome guy. He was really closely involved with Sea Shepherd, and also an organisation called Pelican Rescue, doing some great things. Zolly was lead singer of Pennywise at the time, and I had some good times with Zolly, particularly with one gig they did in UK, Shepherd's Bush Empire, and I actually got to go on stage. Zolly had me up on stage introducing Sea Shepherd, and I got to sing to Bro Him with Zolly. So it was quite a buzz.
Nice, sounds epic. So Sea Shepherd has been going for many years, and you were volunteering for around 10 years, which is a massive amount of time, and
Yep.
and you had first-hand experience of freeing animals and saving animals. Could you tell us a little bit more about the other projects that Sea Shepherd do to sort of help people realise that these things are going on and make people more aware of the amazing things that Sea Shepherd are doing?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, within the last couple of years, they've been working more closely with governments, particularly in West Africa, against illegal fish poaching operations within the West African seas. They're working quite closely with governments in Gambia and the west coast of Ivory. So just working closely with those governments and helping to shut down those illegal operations. And a lot of them are coming from China, so that we're finding that local fishermen who would have been going out and taking, you can agree or disagree with the ethics, but you have to look at that. There are local fishermen who are earning a living and sustainably earning a living from the oceans. Whether you agree with it or not is something that they're doing. And then suddenly you get these huge Chinese fishing fleets come in, which are just taking out absolutely everything from the ocean, and then these people are losing their livelihoods. So we're working quite closely with the government and with those fishermen as well. We're finding that those fishermen are on board, but also that it's a way of educating those fishermen, particularly against shark finning as well, is that if they work with the environment and they work with ocean conservation organisations and they try and preserve that environment, then they can rely on other methods like tourism, and sort of try and get an alternative revenue stream to them. So it's opening up a lot of options there for individuals and different countries.
The most famous stuff that I've seen is the work that is and was done around Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Antarctica. Mm-hmm.
Well, not just Antarctica, but like because Japanese culture is very seafood sort of related, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I think you're probably thinking about Taiji and what's going on there with the dolphin slaughter, and again that's something which Western culture and the rest of the world is not really aware of. But there's a fantastic movie called The Cove, which I recommend seeing. It's again it was done in conjunction with Sea Shepherd. And there is that there's a lot of money to be made, and again, it's not so much the Japanese culture, it's Western culture as well, because the the Japanese fishermen there, they're not using a lot of the dolphins and the whales which are caught there. They're actually farming them out to dolphinariums and aquariums around the USA, around Saudi Arabia. So that, it's just awful what's going on there. And again, a similar thing to the grinder wrap in the
Faroe Islands.
Faroe Islands. It's just that the way that they are herded into these bays where they are literally just, there's no means of escape and they're just slaughtered. I recommend watching the Cove and finding out a little bit more about it and spreading the word there.
Also, Seaspiracy's on the way out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, 24th of March on Netflix, and I think that's going to open a lot of people's eyes.
Because it does. We've only been able to see the trailer so far, but there's clips of the Cove area, and not just that. It's working with Sea Shepherd again, isn't it?
It is. Yep. And there's this sort of, again, there's people that seem to treat the oceans as this unlimited reserve of this infinite resource, but also at the same time as a garbage patch. That, you know, I mean, it's Paul Watson has often made an analogy that people see that the oceans as a larder and as a toilet at the same time, but that, you know, you wouldn't go and defecate in your fridge, but that's kind of what we're doing with our oceans. We're seeing them as an unlimited food supply, but also as a toilet and a dumping ground as well.
It's really mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is about like crazy things going on is that you have positive groups like Sea Shepherd and volunteers like yourself going out there and making change happen.
Mm-hmm. And people are so much unaware of these things that there's a lot of ignorance going on, that people are just not aware that these things are happening. Yeah. And some of the more sort of direct actions that we've taken on land have just been awareness raising, doing stunts and things that which really sort of bring home to people the brutality of what's going on. And when you talk to people and explain to them what's happening, they'll just say, well, no, that can't possibly happen. That sort of thing doesn't happen. It doesn't go on. And it's, yeah, it does. But
it's like a harsh, like breaking people's bubbles. Like we're bursting the bubble, and we need to do that because otherwise people just sit in apathy and ignorance.
Yeah.
Have you got another track that you'd like to play?
I have, yeah. Actually, and funny, talking about apathy and ignorance, it's it's the Battle of the Beanfield by the Levellers, which of course never ever happened. And again, this is one is, apart from being a great track, the Battle of the Beanfield really sort of opened up my eyes that I lived very close to the area where it happened. I lived just across the fields from Stonehenge. Where the Battle of the Beanfield happened was literally about 4 or 5 miles down the road from where I was living and where I grew up on the farm. And again, it was that age. I would have been about 15, 16 then. So I was just becoming switched on politically, and what I saw happening to the New Age travellers over that summer and previous summers before the actual Battle of the Beanfield, that there was just that ignorance, intolerance, and and it kind of switched me on and switched my eyes, opened my eyes to the political awareness that I have now.
So for anyone listening, how could they get involved with Sea Shepherd?
Well, every country will have its own chapter. We've got a chapter here in the UK, and anyone can become involved. I mean, whether it's just acting as a volunteer, helping raise funds and going out and raising awareness, doesn't matter how old or how young you are. In fact, one of the oldest people that we had on board was an amazing lady by the name of Joan Court. She was absolutely fantastic. She was 83 when she went to Antarctica, and she was a phenomenal woman. And in fact, when we did an activity at the Japanese embassy a few years ago. I think it was about 13 years ago last week. Joan Court was our secret weapon, and we managed to shut down the Japanese embassy in protest. We put a protester up on the roof there and caused a bit of an incident. We had an armed response team come out and shut down the embassy, and just after probably about an hour and a half into the siege, and sort of when they opened everything up, they opened up the doors again, and then we wheeled out our secret weapon of the day, which was Joan. And Joan, sort of little old lady, walked into the Japanese embassy, saying that she wanted to get a visa to travel to Japan, and she was quite frail and quite elderly, so a few of the security guards sort of, oh, lovely lady, come on in, we'll help you up, and we're helping her up the steps like she was a poor old lady. And as soon as she got inside, then she just walked up to the nearest staircase, locked on, pulled out a megaphone and let rip.
That's amazing.
And they had to shut down the embassy again. So we had sort of 2 sieges and 2 shutdowns within 5 or 6 hours.
Well, the thing is about direct action is that it grows awareness, doesn't it? That's the positive of it.
Yeah, exactly. So your question about sort of how can people volunteer? It's just it's checking out the website and buying the merchandise. Give a little bit of money if you can. Just watch Seaspiracy next week and look into a few more of Sea Shepherd's films that they've been involved in.
You said Shark's Water, yeah?
Shark Water, Rob Stewart. Unfortunately, Rob's no longer with us. He died in a diving accident a few years ago, and it was a great loss to environmentalism and conservation because he was working on a couple of really good projects. And he really opened my eyes with Shark Water, and he opened a lot of people's eyes as well. The Cove is another one. Obviously, Animal Planet. Paul has got a huge amount of books and material that he's written. I recommend a lot of his books. In fact, he's just rewritten Earth Force, which is kind of like my activist Bible. He's just rewritten a third version of that.
So, just for the people who aren't aware, Paul Watson he's the founder of Sea Shepherd, isn't he?
He was the founder of Sea Shepherd, founded in 1977, and was one of the original founders of Greenpeace as well.
And so his stuff is widely available, his books and his the other Sea Shepherd films, or all the films that Sea Shepherd have supported.
Yep, of course, yep.
I touched on your upbringing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I am intrigued as to how your family respond to your veganism now.
Yeah, they were a little shocked. I think the biggest shock was going vegetarian. Initially going vegetarian, my mother was just sort of like, "Well, you don't expect me to cook 2 meals a day, and have to cook for you as well." And I said, "Yeah, fine, no problem at all." And I've always kind of looked after myself, so it was put to me that's like, "Well, if you want to do that, then you cook for yourself and fend for yourself," which suited me fine, and which I think was quite open-minded of them as well. That it was kind of like, well, yeah, we don't agree and we can't really say anything or lecture you, so just get on with it. So yeah, they've always been a little sort of tolerated it, but the switch to veganism, they weren't really at all surprised. But now it's just sort of, my mum, it's almost like it's an affliction, because my mother sort of like sometimes, like say, reads the back of packets or sometimes, and we'd be looking at a bag of salad and we go, "Ooh, it's got chicory leaf in," and is that all right? And it's like, "Yes, Mum, it's a vegetable." It's just, what's hard to understand about that? But and it's kind of, I think, has opened their eyes a little bit more as well, and that they've changed their diet. They do sort of have 2 or 3 meat-free days per week, and will quite happily have vegetarian meals, and they've really, really sort of cut down their meat consumption as well, and made other choices, in the meat that they do eat will be organic or will be free range. So there's some sort of welfare issues there as well.
Okay, so and are they supportive, would you say, of what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. That they're sort of, I don't think they really have quite taken in some of the things that I've been involved in. It's kind of like, oh, that's nice, dear. Yeah, okay.
What I like to ask my guests is, where do you see veganism in, say, like 5 years' time?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, it's difficult to say because we're in the middle of a pandemic at the moment. So it's from what I can see is that there's a big switch. There's definitely a switch away from meat and from dairy as well. In fact, I've noticed with even just this last year or so that trying to buy non-dairy milk anywhere is just it's a nightmare. It seems to be the shelves are empty of like almond milk, oat milk at my local supermarket is just gone all the time. And I just think, first of all, I was thinking that it's just this particularly bad supermarket and not restocking their shelves. But I think there has been a conscious switch, and there is a demand there. When manufacturers or when somebody like Nestle release a vegan Kit Kat, then there's obviously it's not a fad anymore. It's not a trend.
No.
It is a movement, and they realise that now, and they have to capitalise on that. And I think the old markets and the old ideals, they're dying, and they've got to make their money somewhere, and they're making that switch now. Unfortunately, that I guess the trade-off there is that these smaller organisations, that these ethical and
More smaller companies,
more smaller sustainable organizations which have been around supporting vegans for donkey's years, they're going to suffer as a result of it, because the big boys are going to come in and see that there's money to be made there, and more opportunities, and they've got the marketing spend to pull people over with them and swallow up the smaller organizations.
Okay, but from a positive perspective, you can see veganism growing in the next 5 years.
It's most definitely, yeah. I mean, I was reading something today that there's been a massive drop in meat consumption in China. Now, when young people in a country like China start making decisions like that, it's a movement now.
Awesome. Do you have another track that you'd like to play?
I do, yeah. It's the Idols and Danny Nedelko. I love that. I'm a huge fan of punk. I grew up in the punk era. I was a little bit too young to enjoy it, and I kind of sort of missed out on it. But it was something which I've always really listened to, and I love the Idols for the fact that they're kind of rebirthing punk, and they've brought it around, and they've reinvigorated it and made it to a modern theme. And they're talking about things which are happening now, sort of like Danny Nedelko is about is multiculturalism and being tolerant to people, and that's the ethos of punk. It was really that everyone's equal. Punk had this reputation of being of violence because of the Sex Pistols and the way that they portrayed themselves. But really the whole ethos of punk was tolerance, brotherhood, and multiculturalism.
Mark also has his own radio show. It's called Kinda Sound, isn't it, Mark?
It is, yeah, Kinda Sound. I was initially working for them as social media manager, and was sort of brought on board to bring them over to. They're a very small internet radio station, so the idea was to try and grow their listenership, trying to get them to more mainstream channels and get a little bit more exposure for them, and to grow the to grow the channel, because they're all about love and kindness, and kindness to people, kind to animals, kindness to the planet, and just basically a holistic ethos and lifestyle. So I was brought in to do social media for them, and then became a little bit more involved, and was invited to have my own show. I have my own show now on a Thursday night. My first show was actually broadcast last night, and I interviewed the ethical vegan Jordi Casamigiana, and that's that's actually available now on YouTube on our Kind of Sound channel. And last Monday, just gone, I interviewed Captain Paul Watson as well. And so, yeah, edited the interview yesterday, and that will be going out next Thursday, the 18th, on Kind of Sound.
Oh, amazing! So yeah, so people can go and actually see a first-hand interview with the person we've been talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So check out our channel on YouTube, and the website is kindofsound.org.
Okay, awesome. And is there any other links you'd like people to know about today as well?
I don't think there is actually. No.
Okay. Well, it's been really interesting to learn about your journey and about the sort of the things you've been involved with and the different places you visit and stuff. So overall, Mark, just thank you for your time is from me.
It's been a pleasure as always, Bertie. It's good to see you again as well.
All right. Well, have a lovely evening, Mark, and I'll catch you soon.
You too, buddy. You take care.